Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. Yes, the Democrats have failed yet again. Predictably, Trump was acquitted in the Senate during the Democrats' second bogus impeachment attempt. They had nothing. In fact, in this impeachment attempt, they had even less than nothing, which is exactly what they had in their first impeachment attempt. I mean, this was amazing. The Democrats have gone full tyranny here. I mean, let's face it, they have gone full tyranny. They don't believe in democracy. They don't abide by the Constitution. And now they have gone full Orwellian as they try to target anybody who politically disagrees with them to try and punish them, cast them out of society. I mean, George Orwell's 1984 would be less dystopian than what the Democrats are engaged in right now. The Democrats on Capitol Hill, the Democrats running Facebook, Twitter, the social media giants. I mean, my God, they are pushing us full speed over the cliff, leaving us very little options as far as what it is we can do to bring back civil society in a peaceful manner. Now, the Democrats are out there all furious and upset that they weren't able to impeach President Trump to try and prevent him from running in 2024. Why? Because they could not legitimately beat him in 2020. And after what they have done, we all know what happened in the election. We're not allowed to talk about it on YouTube. We're not allowed to talk about it on Facebook and Twitter, because the fake fact checkers will come down and slap you with a so-called fact check and then get your page limited distribution, block you from being able to get anything done or talk or engage. The fact checkers, that is one of the biggest scams that is out there, because I'll get back into the impeachment here in a moment, but in my observation, 49% of the fact checks are opinion-based. They're not even about the facts. They're just expressing an opinion. Oh, I just disagree with you. I don't like your opinion. Therefore, even though there's no facts to counter the opinion, or, maybe the facts are equally interpretable both ways, we're going to claim that you were spreading misinformation just because we don't like it. And that fact check is called missing context. Yeah. I mean, these are the same fact checkers that will claim missing context if you play a video of Biden talking about how he has the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in history, or Maxine Waters going out there telling her people to, basically inciting them to violence. And they'll say, missing context. Right. Then the other 49% of the fact checks are them claiming to be fact checking something that you didn't even say. Right. So I got one example here, a little while back, where I posted about how the WHO was changing their testing requirements. Of course, this was aimed at trying to, lower, positive reporting. So it looks like Biden actually did something. And I just pointed out, once again, proving that COVID is mostly political. Their fact check was based off of the claims that, the WHO claims that 99% of their testing, or their positive tests, are accurate. Where in my post was I talking about the accuracy of the test? I wasn't. I was talking about how they're changing how they're doing the test. So the fact check wasn't even relevant to what it is I was saying, but they do that in order to try and claim that you're spreading misinformation so that they can then silence you. Well, they've also gone off and pulled this scam when it comes to talking about the election. It doesn't matter what the facts, evidence, and data says. If you dare try to talk about it, you're silenced. And then the same thing happens when we talk about what happened on January 6th. Now, the Democrats haven't failed to impeach or convict President Trump. You have Schumer coming out and saying this is a day that lives in infamy, comparing the failure to convict in the Senate to things like Pearl Harbor. Really? Pearl Harbor? And what's their claim? Oh, because people stormed the Capitol. Well, you know what? I'm actually surprised that hasn't happened sooner. And I'm surprised that hasn't happened more often. But the biggest thing that I am impressed with the Democrats on is their ability to engage in blatant lies and open hypocrisy with a straight face. I mean, wow, it's amazing. So they're going off there trying to say, well, now the Democrats are the Republicans are anti-democratic and they supported insurrection and an attack on the Capitol. And it's like, really? You're going to go off and try and talk to us about that? You know, you're the ones who engaged in supporting people burning down cities and neighborhoods. Not only did you support them, you financially supported them. Now, if you want to go off and claim that Trump incited violence, incited the storming of the Capitol, well, you may have one point, depending on how you're looking at this. And that is, Trump told people to peacefully protest. And he was a little careless with his words. He forgot to clarify he meant peacefully protest in the traditional sense. Instead, people got confused after what they saw the media marketing as peaceful protesting. So people got confused and they went off and they peacefully protested like the Democrats were, and as the media had claimed to be peaceful protesting. Although I don't recall the peaceful protesting at the Capitol involving setting things on fire and burning the place down. So, you know, it was pretty benign compared to what the left had been engaged in. So, yes, maybe if you can claim that Trump just forgot to clarify he meant peacefully protesting in the traditional sense, not how the left has marketed peaceful protesting or what is peaceful protesting over the last 5 years. You know, so if you're upset that people went off and your claim is Trump incited violence by saying peacefully protest, then maybe you need to look at the mirror over how you've redefined what peaceful protesting looks like. Now, of course, we know what had happened on January 6th. It was pre-planned days in advance, so Trump's statements didn't incite anything. Right? And Trump had come out and said, stop the violence. Do not do this. Which is more than the Democrats have done. The Democrats have actually funded people, got them out of jail to get them back on the streets and into violence. So it's interesting if Schumer wants to go off and claim that failing to convict Trump in the Senate is a day that will live in infamy. Well, you know what? Then I would say what lives in infamy is the Republicans' failure to immediately file articles of impeachment on Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and almost every Democrat in the House and Senate. Why? Because under their own definition of what incitement is, every Democrat on Capitol Hill and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are guilty of inciting violent insurrection through their support of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, going off and burning down cities, going off and promoting and celebrating murdering political opponents. The fact that the Democrats had supported that means that they are not only guilty under their own standards, but they are far more guilty and culpable than their claims of Donald Trump on January 6th. So where's the articles of impeachment? Where are the filing to have every last Democrat removed from office for their incitement of violence, for their promotion of violence, for their active funding of violent insurrection? You notice how the standards are never the same. You know, because the Democrats are all about the two-tiered rigged system. Rules for you, but not for them. It's really interesting how they're able to get away with it with a straight face, and how there's enough support on the left for them to be able to do that. I mean, it's like, to be a Democrat, you have to be a brain dead hypocrite. So they want to go off and claim this is a day that lives in infamy. Really, Trump did nothing. Trump didn't do anything. And that is something that I'm actually upset about, is that Trump just rolled over and played dead. Because we know what happened. Now, they want to go off on all of this emotional appeal. We all saw the videos where, by and large, the storming of the Capitol was far more peaceful than any left-wing protest, than any protest that we've seen by Black Lives Matter or Antifa. By and large, it was mostly peaceful. You had people being escorted around by the Capitol Police. You had the Capitol Police just directing people where to go. I mean, yes, there were some unfortunate things that had happened, some things that do need to be condemned. But if they're going to go off and say that Trump incited violence through his rhetoric, through his talks about the election, well, then we need to actually start wondering here about what is it that incited people to violence, if you're going to make that claim. Because Trump went out there and just was being honest. So if being honest about something incites people to violence, then who really incited the violence? The person who went out there and exposed the truth, or the people who engaged in the lies and the cover-ups that, when they were exposed, got people angry? Since when should we outlaw and say it is incitement to violence for someone to go out there and just say something honest, supported by facts and evidence? And they want to claim that's incitement to violence? That going out there and saying something that is, by the data, true, and then saying the words peacefully protest is somehow an incitement to violence? That is an interesting question. Now, as far as it goes, I need to point out here, we have a Second Amendment for a reason. And so, no, I don't necessarily condemn the people storming the Capitol. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the Second Amendment. When the government becomes so corrupt, so out of control, so tyrannical, that we, the people, have the ability to rise up and remove those corrupt officials from government and replace them with a legitimate government of, for, and by the people. But right now we have a government of, for, and by the elitists that were not democratically elected by the people. They went off and they changed all the election laws unconstitutionally before the election. They use very questionable companies in order to run the voting machines that are done in complete secret. The voting machines where no one has the ability to assess its software, and we caught quite a few of them switching votes. The adjudication process, which has absolutely zero oversight. And then the shutting down of the election when it still wasn't going their way. And then when it was suddenly restarted, all of a sudden the results had almost changed completely overnight. And some places they had to shut it down multiple times. People don't have any faith or confidence in the election. Now, we can already prove that Joe Biden is illegally and unconstitutionally seated in the White House before we even get to the voting machines or what happened when they shut down the count. So when you take a look at this, they do this stuff because they have no fear. They don't fear that we, the people, will exercise what the Second Amendment is actually there for. And then when it looked like for the first time that, holy crap, they're in danger, Oh, they're upset. Oh, we must shut that down. Oh, we must go off and try and punish immediately the president of the United States, the legitimate president of the United States, for not rolling over and playing dead, because going out there and talking about what happened will incite people to violence. It's all about censoring and covering up the truth. Now, let me point this out for you here with this particular article from the Daily Wire. Report: National Guard could stay in D.C. at least through fall of 2021, says report. Now, let's actually think through this logically. A government of, for, and by the people, elected in a democratic process, where the results have the believability of legitimacy, don't need the military to try and protect them. They shouldn't have any fear of the people, because in a democracy where the elections are free and fair, you may win some elections, you may lose some elections, but as long as people believe in the free and fairness of the election and the legitimacy of the outcome, people accept it. People accept, what had happened, and then they plan on how they're going to win the next election. But you know who does need military protection? Tyrannical dictators and those who just overthrew a government in a coup. Those are the only ones who ever need protection from the military. And if you notice, every time there's a tyrant in office, a tyrant at the head of the government, or every time a coup has successfully overthrown a legitimate government, somehow that is only sustained through the support of the military. That is sustained because they bring in the military to protect the newly installed tyrant, or to protect the unpopular tyrant who's in office or at the head of the country in direct opposition to the will of the people. Never has a legitimately elected leader needed the protection of the military. This goes off to show here that despite the claims of the media, and despite all the things that the elitists of both parties are trying to push, nobody is buying the election results. Even now, people still do not believe that the results are legitimate. Undoubtedly. And as Tom Fitton has come out and stated, we all know what the impeachment was all about. It is about criminalizing speech, criminalizing free speech, the ability to examine what happens, to examine what's going on in our government and criticize it, to speak out against it. Now, of course, the Democrats, they try to claim that they're the party about free speech and liberty. Really, their actions prove otherwise. The only speech they allow is you being out there saying, yep, oh, I agree, you're 100% right. But any dissenting opinion is criminalized. That's not protected by the First Amendment. The only right you have under the First Amendment is to agree with them. Anybody who disagrees, well, that's criminal. That's not protected by the First Amendment. Questioning the results of the election is not protected by the First Amendment, according to them. Now, of course, it was constitutionally protected when they were going off and baselessly in 2016 claiming that that election was illegitimate. They had no evidence. They had no proof. What did they have at most? A few ads run on Facebook that got next to no engagement? Well, actually, the only ads that got engagement were the ads that Russia targeted towards the Democrats in support of Hillary. But they always forget about that part. So they can go out there and say, someone is illegitimate, is a pawn of a foreign government. They can go out there and incite violence. Videos of people assassinating the president, or dressing people up as the president to be assassinated in some play, and so forth. And they can go out there and tell their people, hey, if you see anybody from that cabinet or anybody who supports a president, if you see anybody who even wears merchandise, hats, shirts, or whatever that support the president, you need to confront them. You need to run them out of public spaces. They can go off and do that. And somehow that's not incitement to violence. But going out there and saying, hey, we have some serious questions here about how this was conducted. And looking at these data sets here, we would want an investigation. Something doesn't smell right here. So we must peacefully protest until we get to the bottom of this, that we should not certify anything until we have an investigation to determine the legitimacy of their results. That is criminal, according to them. But going out there and saying, hey, anybody who supports Trump, you need to confront them and run them out of office. Hey, we're going to do videos of assassinations and all of this. That's not incitement whatsoever. And so what they're trying to do here is, as Tom Fenton has mentioned, is criminalize speech, where you're only allowed to say what it is they want you to say. Because Trump wasn't rolling over for the elitists, he had to go. And the fact that he was daring to speak out against what the elitists had done, well, he must be punished. Because you're not allowed to question the elitists. You're not allowed to go out there and express an opinion that they don't agree with. Does that really sound like free speech to you? Or does that sound like how things are operated in, say, North Korea? Because that's exactly what the Democrats are like. They're like the North Korean dictator. Despite everything that they try to claim, right? So we know they're trying to criminalize speech. They're trying to criminalize any disagreement with the left. And then, of course, you have the typical sellouts in the Republican Party. So you have McConnell come out and say, although we voted not guilty, Trump is practically and morally responsible. Really? How? How? He told people to stop when it started. He didn't tell anybody to actually engage in violence. He used the words peaceful. It's not Trump's fault if people are confused after looking at the left for the past 5 years on what peaceful protesting looks like. We take a look at all the times the Democrats have stormed the Capitol, like, say, during the Kavanaugh hearings, or any of the state capitals. Interesting. But he wants to go off and say he's practically and morally responsible. How? How? Just try and explain that. McConnell, you fraud. If I were you, I would be going off here and I would be taking a look at everybody who's coming out and trying to claim that Trump has any responsibility or culpability for what happened on January 6th, and see what the real recall election laws are for your state. And start engaging in a recall, because those who had just won re-election or just got into office, they think they're safe. By the time they're up for re-election in 6 years, you're going to have forgotten all about this. And that's what they rely on, the memory hole. So that you won't remember what had happened by the time it's up for re-election. Or at least you won't be angry about it anymore, so that they can continue to get reelected. This is part of the scam that they go in. They claim one thing during the election, and then they do a different thing once they're in office because they think they're safe. We should be taking a look at what the laws are, for recalling an election on these frauds. We need to be just as concerned about the frauds inside of the Republican Party as we are about the tyrants and elitists of the Democrat Party. Morally and practically responsible, my butt. Actually, I would say McConnell, you and most of the Republicans on Capitol Hill have more moral and practical responsibility than Donald Trump, because you allowed this farce to happen. You refused to step up and exercise the constitutional safeguards in order to protect the legitimacy of the election. Just a thought. That's just a thought right there. And of course, the Democrats have all the responsibility, morally and practically, because of how they went through and conducted themselves. It is just unbelievable. That now McConnell goes out there and, of course, he votes not guilty because, he's hoping that, we'll be allowed free and fair elections in 2022, as if the Democrats are going to allow that after getting away with it in 2020. And he's hoping to be able to reclaim majority status in the House and the Senate, especially in the Senate, in 2022. So he needs to protect the ability to have a majority that he can control. So, of course, they, do the right thing of acquitting Trump, but they're still going to go out there and blast him, and try to do everything they can to derail his political voice. Because McConnell is all about McConnell. He's all about trying to protect the rigged system of the elitists because he is an elitist. He's trying to keep a system in which him and his family's personal business continues to profit and prosper unfairly in a rigged system that protects them from competition. So McConnell, you need to go. If you're in Kentucky, take a look at what your recall elections are. All right, it is just sickening. But of course, after the Democrats have tried to do this impeachment attempt and claim that Trump incited violence, what happens after the acquittal? A bunch of leftists go off and vandalize the homes of Trump's lawyers, which is another thing. We saw throughout the entire election challenge how the left would go out and threaten lawyers and threaten public officials who dared question or stand up to what they saw in the election. But that's not incitement. Them going off and saying, "Oh, you're a whore, you're racist, and if you don't allow this to go through, and we know where your kids are." That's apparently not as incitement according to the left. Going off and threatening lawyers if they don't drop a client. Oh, that's not incitement. Going off and vandalizing their homes. No, nothing wrong there. But questioning what the Democrats did and speaking out against the Democrats to present facts and evidence and simply proclaim the undeniable truth, that's incitement. Wow. So they go off and they vandalize the homes of the lawyers that defended Trump during the Senate trial. Amazing. Now, the Democrats are trying to go out there and say this was a victory. This was a successful impeachment. We may have failed to convict, but we were able to get 7 Republicans in the Senate to vote to convict. So this was bipartisan. It's amazing. If you get one person from the other side, it's considered bipartisan. Or if you get 7 people. Now, I'm taking a look at this. 7 people out of 50. That's not very bipartisan to me. That doesn't show that there was much of any support. And of course, we know who those 7 Republicans are. It's the typical sellouts. It's the Democrats that pretend to be Republicans. The ones who should be recalled and replaced immediately. The ones who never should have even gotten reelected or elected in the first place because they're such frauds. How they ever got into office, I don't know. Maybe it's because, no one else ran against them, and so they were elected by default. At least in the primaries. My God. But yeah, 7 Republicans voted to convict Trump, even though there was no basis for an impeachment, even though there was no constitutionality to this impeachment attempt. They still went off and tried. And who are those 7 Republicans? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Those 7 Republicans are Richard Burr from North Carolina, Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Susan Collins of Maine. Why are we not surprised? Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. How does she ever get elected? Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, they are one of the top 2 that need to go. And of course, Mitt Romney, who was the one who lost to Obama in 2012, which should have been an easy election for him. A failure, a spineless dweeb. Mitt Romney. And his whole thing is, and we know why Mitt Romney, has come out and spoken against Trump, because Romney is jealous. Romney is jealous that Trump was able to do what Romney couldn't do, which was beat one of the easiest candidates possible to beat. It's one of those situations where everyone tries to say, oh, well, Obama, he had popular support. No. Obama wasn't popular at all. Maybe in 2008 when he was able to con everybody, but 2012, that election should have been an easy ride for Republicans. But unfortunately, we had a spineless dweeb that was constantly tripping over himself, trying to, placate to left-wing narratives. Let them dictate to him what he can and cannot say. All right, Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse and Pennsylvania Pat Toomey. These are all people who should immediately be recalled if possible, and should be immediately removed and replaced in office. Unbelievable. Okay, so here's where I'm going to go ahead and end the video portion of the show. All right, so of course, wherever you're watching this video, where I prefer you to go is over to Rumble. So if you're watching this on YouTube, all right, stop feeding the left's ability to attack us. Stop feeding the left's ability to undermine democracy and overthrow the Constitution. Stop funding that. Look in the link in the description below to find my channel on Rumble and go watch me there. Or another option, a place where they really can't do any type of censorship, is go check out the podcast. Go anywhere where you're able to get podcasts, whether that be iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, all of those. And go look for the podcast. Here's the podcast art. It's simply called The Jacob Johnston Show. I know, not very original. In any event, subscribe, leave me ratings, reviews, smash the like button. You know the drill. All right, and if you want to catch the rest of the show, head on over to the audio version of the podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back again soon.